Lyra walked slowly down the busy streets of the city, her steps heavy with the weight of her thoughts. Her heart raced as she gripped the stack of job applications tightly in her hands. Each piece of paper was a small hope, a hope that today might be the day she finally found a job. But each day had passed in disappointment, with rejection after rejection. Her skin, a soft, pale blue, marked her as an alien, a refugee from a distant planet destroyed in the war. It had been years since the destruction of her homeworld, but the scars of loss were still fresh. Her only family now was her daughter, Nara, a child of only 7, and together, they had to survive in a strange new world. Lyra had tried everything. She had sent out resumes, filled in endless forms, and walked from one business to another hoping for a chance. But no one would hire her. She wasn't just a widow with no home, she was an alien. To many humans, that was reason enough to look at her with suspicion or outright fear. The bustling city seemed indifferent to her struggle, a blur of faces and noise as she walked past stores, cafes, and offices. Some people noticed her, but most quickly looked away. Lyra had learned long ago that the world was not kind to someone like her. Her presence on Earth was a constant reminder of the war, and many human companies didn't want to risk employing an alien, even if she had qualifications that far exceeded the job she was applying for. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything since the morning. Nara had eaten the last of their food, and Lyra didn't have the heart to tell her that there was nothing left. The last thing she wanted was to worry her daughter further. She had promised Nara that everything would be okay, that they would make it. But deep down, Lyra was terrified. She was running out of time and resources. She stopped for a moment outside a large building, its glass doors reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside, a sign read, "Help wanted, no experience necessary." Lyra hesitated. She had already applied for dozens of jobs like this, only to be turned down. But there was something about this one that made her pause. She could feel the exhaustion in her bones, but she refused to give up. Not when her daughter needed her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The receptionist, a young woman with dark hair, looked up as Lyra entered. There was a brief moment of silence as the receptionist's eyes flickered over Lyra's appearance, then she forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. Lyra took a small step forward, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "I saw the sign outside. I'm here to apply for the job." The receptionist nodded and slid a paper across the desk. "Fill out this form and we'll get back to you." She didn't offer a smile this time. Lyra took the form, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the desk. She sat down and began filling it out, her mind racing. The questions were simple. Name, contact information, employment history, but she knew that her alien status would be the real reason she wouldn't be hired. It always was. She had seen it happen too many times before. She finished filling out the form and returned it to the receptionist, who glanced at it briefly before sliding it into a drawer without looking back at Lyra. The alien woman stood there unsure of what to do next. "Thank you," the receptionist said, her voice still polite but lacking warmth. "We'll call if we're interested." Lyra nodded and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, she heard the receptionist murmur something under her breath. She couldn't hear it clearly, but she didn't need to. It was the same thing she had heard from so many others. "It's not like they're really qualified." Lyra stepped out into the street, her heart sinking. Her hand gripped the strap of her bag tightly as she walked away from the building. Another doubt closed in her face. She felt like she was running out of options. Her thoughts shifted to Nara. The little girl was the reason she kept going, even when everything seemed hopeless. Nara had inherited her soft blue skin, her pointed ears, and her gentle nature. She was a perfect mix of her mother's strength and the warmth that Earth seemed to lack, but it wasn't enough to keep the world from seeing them as outsiders. Lyra's pace quickened as she walked, her eyes scanning the street. Her heart was heavy with fear, but she couldn't let herself break down. She couldn't afford to. Her daughter was depending on her. As Lyra passed by a small cafe, a flash of movement caught her eye. A human man sat at a table by the window, his gaze fixed on a tablet. For a brief moment, their eyes met. He smiled gently, not with the kind of pity that she had grown used to, but with genuine kindness. It was a small thing, but for some reason, it made her pause. It reminded her that not everyone on Earth was indifferent to her existence. But Lyra didn't have time to think about that. She had more job applications to fill out, more doors to knock on. The city felt like it was swallowing her whole, but she would keep going, for Nara, always for Nara. The next day, Lyra found herself back on the same crowded streets, her feet aching from the endless walking. She had applied for more jobs, each one met with the same polite rejection. The sting of failure was becoming familiar, but it never hurt any less. It was like a shadow that followed her everywhere. As she walked, the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders. Her fingers tightened around the straps of her bag, and her eyes stayed fixed on the pavement. She could not afford to look up, could not afford to get lost in the faces of the people around her. They would never understand. But then she heard a voice. It was soft, but it stopped her in her tracks. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Lyra turned around, startled. A man stood a few feet behind her, his eyes kind and curious. He was human, like so many others in the city, but something about his presence felt different. There was no fear in his gaze, no judgment, just genuine concern. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm fine," she said, her voice flat. "Just tired." The man smiled softly. "I can imagine. It's not easy, is it?" She looked up at him, surprised by his understanding. "No, it's not," she admitted. "But I'll manage." There was a long pause, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra didn't know what to say. Humans didn't often approach her unless they needed something from her, usually a favor or information. This man, though, he seemed different. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just there. "I couldn't help but notice you were going in and out of businesses earlier," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "I'm Lucas, by the way." He extended his hand, his smile still warm. "I work just down the street." Lyra hesitated, looking at his outstretched hand. For a moment, she thought about walking away, about keeping her distance, but then something inside her shifted. She realized she was tired of being alone, tired of being ignored and judged. She had nothing to lose by talking to him. She shook his hand, her grip firm but unsure. "Lyra," she said, her voice quiet. Lucas nodded. "It's nice to meet you, Lyra. I don't mean to be nosy, but you looked like you were struggling. Is everything okay?" Lyra glanced around, feeling the familiar rush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She didn't want to explain, didn't want to share her troubles. But there was something in Lucas's eyes that made her feel like she could. "My daughter." "She's sick," Lyra began, her voice faltering. "I'm just trying to find work, so I can take care of her, but no one will hire me. I'm different." Lucas frowned, his expression turning serious. "Different? Because you're—" He trailed off, unsure of how to phrase it, but Lyra knew what he meant. "Yes," she said, her voice soft. "Because I'm an alien. And I've been rejected so many times, I can hardly believe anyone would want to hire me." Lucas's eyes widened slightly, but there was no fear in his gaze. Instead, there was a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps. "I don't understand why people would treat you like that," he said. "I mean, you're just like everyone else, right?" Lyra smiled faintly, though there was sadness in her eyes. "I wish that were true, but not everyone sees it that way." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to fade away as they stood there on the sidewalk, caught in a quiet moment of understanding. Then, Lucas spoke. Again, his voice gentle but firm. "You know, I think you're really selling yourself short," he said. "There's a lot more to you than meets the eye." And I'm willing to bet there's someone out there who would recognize that, maybe even today. Lyra blinked, surprised by his words. She had spent so long trying to hide her alien nature, trying to fit in. She never expected someone to actually see her for who she really was. I don't know if I'm that lucky, she murmured. Lucas smiled again, but this time there was something more in his expression. Determination, a hint of challenge. Well, what if I told you that I have a job opening at my company? It's nothing fancy, but it might be a good start, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. You want me to work for you? Why not? Lucas shrugged. We're all just people trying to make it in this world. Who's to say we can't help each other out? Lyra felt a wave of emotions flood over her. Hope, confusion, disbelief. Could it really be that simple? Could this stranger be offering her a chance at a fresh start? I don't want to take up too much of your time, Lyra said, still unsure of herself. But if you really mean it? I do, Lucas assured her, his tone steady. Come by the office. See you tomorrow. I'll make sure you get a proper interview. We could use someone like you on the team. Lyra stood there for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. A job. A real job. It was something she had only dreamed of. She didn't know what to say, but the words finally came out. Thank you, she whispered, feeling a surge of gratitude that was almost too much to bear. You don't know what this means to me. Lucas smiled, nodding. Don't mention it, just show up tomorrow and we'll see what happens. Take care, Lyra. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lyra standing there, her heart racing. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might be looking up. The morning came faster than Lyra expected. She woke up earlier than usual, her mind racing with thoughts of the job offer. Nara was still asleep, curled up in her blanket. Lyra smiled softly as she watched her daughter. Nara had been so brave, so strong. But Lyra knew that her little girl needed more than just her mother's love. She needed a future, a chance to grow up in a world where she wasn't judged for being different. Lyra had never felt so determined. Today could change everything. After a quick breakfast, Lyra dressed in the best clothes she had, simple but clean, and made sure Nara was ready for school. She kissed her daughter goodbye, telling her not to worry. I'll be back before you know it, she promised. When Lyra stepped outside, the city felt different. The streets weren't as cold, the faces weren't as unfriendly. It was as if, for the first time, the world wasn't completely against her. She headed toward the office building where Lucas worked, her heart beating faster with each step. As she entered the building, the cool, polished floors reflected her image in the glass doors. She took a deep breath and walked up to the receptionist. Good morning, Lyra said, trying to sound calm. I'm here for the interview with Lucas. The receptionist, a young woman with blonde hair, looked at her with a raised eyebrow. You must be the one he mentioned. She checked the list in front of her and nodded. You're expected. Go on up to the second floor. Lucas is waiting for you. Lyra nodded and made her way to the elevator. Her palms were sweaty and her stomach churned with nerves. She had been in interviews before, but never like this. This was more than just another job. This was her chance to prove that she belonged, that she could be more than just a refugee. The elevator doors opened, and Lyra stepped out onto the second floor. She looked around the open office space where employees were busy working at their desks. Some were typing on computers, others were on the phone. The air smelled faintly of coffee and papers, a scent that was both comforting and overwhelming at the same time. Lyra, over here! Lucas's voice cut through the noise, and Lyra turned to see him waving from a desk in the far corner. She smiled and walked toward him. As she approached, he stood up and extended his hand. I'm glad you made it. Come on in. Lyra followed, him into his office. It was a small room but cozy, with shelves of books and a desk cluttered with papers. Lucas gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs across from his desk. Are you feeling all right? He asked, his tone kind and casual. Lyra nodded. I'm a little nervous, she admitted, but I'm ready. Lucas smiled warmly. That's good to hear. Let's get started then. He pulled a folder from his desk and opened it, scanning a few papers. So Lyra, I see you have a lot of experience in different fields. You've worked in science and technology before, right? Lyra's heart lifted. Finally, someone saw her qualifications. Yes. Back on my planet, I worked as a scientist. I studied energy systems and helped develop new technologies. Lucas raised an eyebrow, impressed. That's incredible. I had no idea. So why do you want to work here, of all places? Lyra hesitated, thinking carefully. I need something stable. My daughter. She needs stability. And I need to prove that I can still contribute, that I can still be a part of something bigger than myself. Lucas nodded, understanding. I completely get that. We need people who are passionate and hardworking, and honestly, after hearing your story, I think you'll fit right in here. He paused for a moment, then smiled. How do you feel about starting with some project management tasks? We're currently working on a few big projects, and I think you'd be great at keeping things organized. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never imagined she would be given such an opportunity. I'd be happy to, she said, feeling a mixture of excitement and disbelief. That's great, Lucas said, his smile growing wider. We're all about teamwork here. You'll be part of a small group that handles several ongoing projects. If all goes well, we can talk about full-time work soon. Lyra's mind was spinning with possibilities. It was everything she had hoped for and more. But she couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. What if her colleagues didn't accept her? What if they saw her as an outsider? Lucas seemed to sense her hesitation. Don't worry, he reassured her. Everyone here is a bit different in their own way. You'll fit in just fine. Lyra nodded, grateful for his reassurance. She had been through so much in her life. Loss, rejection, fear. But now she had a chance to build something new. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. After a few more questions and discussions about the job's responsibilities, Lucas stood up and handed her a small, neatly wrapped package. I hope this makes your first day a little easier, he said with a wink. Lyra took the package, her curiosity piqued. She opened it carefully, revealing a sleek, metallic pen and a small notebook. Thank you, she said softly. This is kind of you. It's the least I can do, Lucas replied. Welcome to the team, Lyra. As she left the office, Lyra felt a strange sense of hope settle in her chest. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things would start to get better. The future was still uncertain, but she wasn't walking through it alone anymore. Lyra's first week at work passed in a blur of new faces, unfamiliar tasks, and moments of doubt. Each day brought its own challenges, but with every passing hour she grew more confident. There were still moments when the weight of being an outsider pressed on her, but Lucas had been right. The people at the company were different. They didn't treat her like an alien. They treated her like a colleague, but it wasn't always easy. One afternoon, as Lyra was sitting at her desk organizing a set of reports, a voice interrupted her concentration. You're the new girl, right? Lyra looked up to see a tall alien woman with dark green skin standing in front of her. Her eyes were sharp and her expression was serious. Yes, Lyra replied, unsure of the woman's tone. I'm Lyra. The woman didn't offer her hand for a handshake. Instead, she folded her arms and leaned against the desk. I'm Drek, she said flatly. I've been here longer than most of the people on this floor. I've seen a lot of new faces come and go. But you're different. Lyra felt a knot form in her stomach. Was this going to be another one of those situations where someone made her feel like an outsider? Drek studied her for a moment and Lyra braced herself. You're the only one like us, I mean an alien. You must feel it, right? The looks, the whispers. They don't trust us here. Not really. Lyra's eyes narrowed. What are you getting at? Drek leaned forward slightly. I'm not trying to cause trouble. In fact, I'm trying to help you. Lyra blinked, confused. Help me? Drek nodded, her expression softening just a little. I've been here long enough to know that humans are not always kind to our kind. I see the way they look at you when you walk by, and I know what it's like to be the odd one out. I'm just saying. You need to stick together. Look out for each other." For a moment, Lyra said nothing. She hadn't expected this. After everything she had gone through, after the way people treated her, it was hard to believe that anyone could offer support. But Drek's words hit a nerve. It was a strange feeling to be understood so quickly by someone she barely knew. "I've always kept to myself," Lyra finally said. "I never wanted to stand out, but it's hard sometimes, being the only one. I don't even know how to fit in." Drek's eyes softened further, and she gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "That's the thing, you don't have to fit in. You just need to find your place. And maybe, just maybe, your place is with those who understand what it's like." Lyra felt something stir within her. Could it be that simple? Could she find allies here? People who weren't afraid of her, who didn't see her as a threat, as... If reading her thoughts, Drek spoke again. "Don't worry, you'll be fine. And if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know. We take care of our own here." The reassurance felt like a small weight lifting off her shoulders. Lyra nodded slowly. "Thank you. I appreciate it." Drek smiled. "Don't mention it. We all need a little help sometimes." As Drek walked away, Lyra sat back in her chair, thinking about the unexpected encounter. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt like she might not have to face everything alone. There was still a long road ahead, but maybe, just maybe, there was hope. The rest of the day passed without incident. Lyra dove into her work, determined to prove herself. She had been given a chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. The tasks were challenging, but she took pride in her progress. Slowly but surely, she was beginning to see the difference she could make. That evening, after work, Lyra returned home to find Nara sitting on the floor, Suro, undid by a pile of coloring books and crayons. Her daughter looked up with a bright smile, and Lyra's heart warmed at the sight. Nara was her reason for everything, the reason she fought through each day, the reason she refused to give up. "How was work, Mama?" Nara asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Lyra smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "It was good," she said softly. "I think I'm starting to fit in." Nara's face lit up. "That's great, Mama. I knew you could do it." Lyra sat down beside her, pulling her daughter into a warm hug. "I hope so, but I'm still learning, Nara. I'm still figuring things out." "You'll get there," Nara said with all the confidence of a child who believed in her mother more than anything else. Lyra chuckled softly and kissed the top of Nara's head. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll try my best." As she tucked Nara into bed that night, Lyra felt a strange sense of peace. She had a job, a place where she was finally starting to belong. She had an unexpected ally in Drek, and while things weren't perfect, they were better than they had been just a week ago. The path ahead was uncertain, but Lyra knew she wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Lyra walked into work the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. She had spent the night thinking about everything Drek had said, about the idea of finding her place here. It wasn't easy, but it seemed possible. Slowly, she was making progress. The tasks were becoming more familiar, and Lucas had been kind, offering helpful advice when needed. But there was something else hanging in the air, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. As she entered the office, she noticed a change. The energy in the room felt different, tense even. The usual hum of activity seemed quieter today, as if everyone was holding their breath. Lyra couldn't help but notice the way some of her colleagues avoided looking in her direction, their gazes quickly darting away when they realized she had caught them staring. She tried to shake off the feeling, reminding herself that she was here to work, not to be distracted by what others thought. But deep down, she knew there was something more at play. There was a growing discomfort in the office, something subtle but undeniable. At lunch, as Lyra sat in the break room, she overheard a group of co-workers talking. They were speaking in hushed tones, their words just barely audible over the sound of the machines in the background. I can't believe he hired her, one of them muttered. Yeah, what was Lucas thinking? I mean, I get that he's trying to be all-inclusive, but hiring an alien? That's risky, another voice said. Lyra's heart sank. The words felt like a punch in the stomach. She knew she had been the subject of whispers before, but hearing, it so plainly stung more than she expected. She looked down at her lunch, her fingers tightening around her sandwich as she tried to keep her composure. She had known this was coming. There would always be people who didn't accept her, who saw her as nothing more than a stranger in their world. But hearing it like this, so openly, was hard to ignore. Drek must have sensed her unease, because she appeared beside Lyra moments later, sitting down with a small plate of food in front of her. Don't listen to them, Drek said softly, her voice steady. There will always be people who won't accept you, but that doesn't mean you should back down. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Lyra looked up at Drek, grateful for the support. I know, it's just hard sometimes. I try to focus on my work, but I can feel the looks. They don't want me here. Drek nodded. I get it. It's not easy being the only one. But remember, you're here because you earned it. You've got the skills, you've got the drive, and Lucas saw that. The others, they'll catch up, or they won't. Either way, it doesn't matter. Lyra smiled weakly. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Drek smiled back, a glint of understanding in her eyes. You're welcome. We all need someone to lean on. As the days went by, the tension in the office only grew. Lyra could feel it in the air, thick and uncomfortable. People were starting to pick sides, and she wasn't sure where she fit in. Some of her coworkers were still polite, but there was a coldness to their interactions. Others, like Drek, remained supportive, but it wasn't enough to ignore the growing hostility. One afternoon, as Lyra sat at her desk, a supervisor approached her with an unusually stern expression on his face. Lyra, he said, his voice clipped. We need to talk. Lyra stood, up confused but trying to stay calm. What's the matter? The supervisor, a tall man with graying hair, looked at her for a long moment before speaking. There have been complaints. Some people don't feel comfortable working with you. They're concerned about your presence here. We've had some issues in the past with alien employees. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. Complaints? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. From whom? I can't say, the supervisor replied coldly. But it's something we need to address. We're going to put you on a probation period. We'll see how things go from here. The words hit her like a wave, leaving her breathless and shaken. She had known the risks, but hearing it out loud made it all feel real. It was as if, despite everything she had done to prove herself, it wasn't enough. The whispers, the stares, they had turned into something more. She was being watched, and not in the way she had hoped. Lyra nodded slowly, her heart heavy. I understand. The supervisor turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he paused and glanced back at her. I just want to be clear. You're not in trouble yet. But the higher-ups are watching. With that, he left, and Lyra was left standing in the middle of the office, feeling more alone than she ever had before. She sat back down at her desk, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What did this mean for her future here? Was this the end of her chance? She had worked so hard to get here, to prove that she belonged, but now it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. Drek was the first to approach after the supervisor left. She could see the concern in her eyes as she sat down beside Lyra. Are you all right? Drek asked gently. Lyra looked at her, a sense of defeat in her voice. They're giving me a probation period. It feels like they're just waiting for me to fail. Drek shook her head. Don't let them control you. This is your fight, and I'll be right there with you. Lyra smiled weakly. Thank you. It means everything to me. For the first time in days, she felt a little bit of hope. She wasn't going to give up. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance to prove herself. Lyra woke up the next morning with a feeling of determination in her chest. The events of yesterday still hung in her mind, the supervisor's cold words echoing in her ears. The probation period, The whispers, the doubt. It all felt like a weight she couldn't escape. But Lyra was no stranger to hardship. She had been through so much in her life, and this was just another challenge. It wasn't the end, not yet. She quickly got ready, making sure Nara had everything she needed before heading out the door. Her daughter had been quiet the night before, sensing something was wrong, but Lyra had done her best to reassure her. "I'm going to make things better," she had promised. Now, as she walked to work, her mind was focused, her steps steady. The city around her was as bustling as ever, but today it seemed different. It felt like the whole world was moving forward while she stood still, unsure of what the day would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. As she entered the office building, the usual sense of unease settled in her stomach. The whispers were still there, though they were quieter today. She could feel the eyes of some of her co-workers as she passed by their desks. But she didn't look at them. She had a job to do, and that was all that mattered. When she reached her desk, she found a small stack of papers waiting for her. It was part of the new project she had been assigned to manage. The paperwork was a mess, and she could already tell it would be a challenge. But that didn't stop her. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work, sorting through the documents. With precision, her mind sharp despite the uncertainty that lingered. An hour into the day, Lucas walked by her desk. He gave her a small nod, his face neutral, but his eyes held a glimmer of something. Encouragement, perhaps. Lyra gave him a small smile in return. She had no idea what was going on behind the scenes, but for now, she had to focus on proving herself. She couldn't afford to lose this chance. Just as she began to feel like she was making progress, she was interrupted by a voice behind her. "Lyra, we need to talk." She turned around to find one of her colleagues, a man named Alan, standing there. He was the one who had given her the cold shoulder since the first day she arrived, and now here he was, looking at her with a mix of disdain and something else. Something she couldn't quite place. "Sure," Lyra said, trying to keep her voice calm. "What's going on?" Alan looked around, making sure no one else was close by, before speaking in a low voice. "I don't know how long you think you can keep this up," he said. "I'm just telling you now. Some of us don't want you. Here, we didn't ask for you, and we sure as hell don't need you." Lyra's heart sank, but she kept her expression steady. "I'm just doing my job," she said, keeping her voice even. Alan smirked. "Your job? You're an alien. You don't belong here. You think you can just waltz in and take our jobs?" Lyra stood up, her breath catching in her throat. "I've worked hard to get here. I'm not here to take anyone's job. I'm here because I earned it." And Alan's smirk faded, but he didn't back down. "We'll see about that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lyra standing there, her heart racing. She was shaken, but she wasn't going to let him win. Not today. She sat back down, at her desk, her hands trembling slightly. She had to remind herself that this wasn't about him. This was about proving to herself, and to Nara, that she could make it. She couldn't let a few small-minded people tear her down. Not now. The rest of the day passed slowly, but Lyra kept her head down and focused on the work at hand. Every time she glanced up, she could feel the eyes of her co-workers on her. Some of them were still watching, still waiting for her to fail, but she didn't let it distract her. She had a job to do, and she was going to do it well. By the end of the day, Lyra had finished organizing the project's paperwork and had made significant progress on the tasks ahead. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her work. Despite everything, she was managing. She wasn't failing. And that in itself felt like a victory. As she packed up to leave, Lucas approached her once more. This time, he smiled warmly. "You're doing great, Lyra," he said, his voice genuine. "I can see the effort you're putting in. Keep it up." Lyra's heart lifted at his words. For the first time that day, she felt like maybe she really could make it. Maybe, despite the challenges, she could prove to everyone that she belonged. "Thank you," Lyra said softly. "I won't let you down." Lucas nodded, giving her a small, encouraging smile before walking away. Lyra stood there for a moment, watching him go. She had been so afraid of failing, but now she realized something. It wasn't about the approval of others. It was about showing herself what she was capable of. And no matter how hard the road was, she wasn't going to give up. She walked out of the office with a renewed sense of determination, ready to face whatever came next. She had proven something important today, not to her coworkers but to herself. She was stronger than she thought. And tomorrow, she would keep fighting. For Nara, for herself, for her future. Lyra awoke to the sound of her alarm ringing, but today felt different. Her heart wasn't heavy with the usual worries. Instead, there was a sense of calm that washed over her, a feeling that today might be the day everything changed. She had worked hard, kept her head down, and fought through the doubts of others. Now, it was time to see if all her effort would pay off. She glanced over at Nara, still fast asleep, curled up in her blanket. Lyra smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Nara had no idea how hard things had been, how difficult it had been to get to this point, but she believed in her mother, and that belief gave Lyra strength. "Today's the day," Lyra whispered to herself. She quickly got ready, making sure to prepare a quick breakfast for Nara before heading out. As she stepped into the streets of the city, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow on the buildings. It felt like a new day, a fresh start. As Lyra entered the office, the familiar hum of activity greeted her. She could hear the sounds of typing, phones ringing, and the soft chatter of her coworkers. But today it felt different. The tension that had hung in the air for the past few days seemed to have eased. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a shift, a quiet, hopeful feeling. When she reached her desk, she saw a few people glance her way, but this time there was no coldness, no whispers. It was as if the atmosphere had changed. She couldn't help but wonder if something had shifted in the office. Maybe they were starting to accept her, or maybe it was just her own sense of peace that made the world seem a little brighter. Lucas walked by her desk, giving her a small nod and a smile. "Good morning, Lyra," he said. "Good morning, Lucas," she replied, her voice steady. As the day went on, Lyra noticed something unexpected. There were no sideways glances, no harsh whispers behind her back. Her co-workers seemed to treat her like any other colleague. The project she had been assigned to was moving forward smoothly, and she had completed several important tasks with little difficulty. By mid-afternoon, Lucas stopped by her desk again. This time his expression was more serious, though there was a warmth in his eyes. "Lyra, can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked. "Of course," she replied, standing up. They walked together to a small meeting room in the back of the office. As they sat down, Lyra felt a small knot form in her stomach. She wasn't sure if this was about her probation period or if there was more trouble ahead. Lucas sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "I've been getting feedback from the team, and I wanted to let you know something." He paused for a moment, and Lyra held her breath, waiting for the worst. "I've seen the way you've been handling the project. You've been working hard and you're doing a great job," Lucas continued. "The team has noticed your effort and they're starting to respect you. We're moving forward with you as part of this team, full-time." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "You're saying..." "I'm saying that your probation period is over," Lucas confirmed, his smile growing. "You're a permanent member of the team now. Congratulations, Lyra." A wave of relief washed over her, and she couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Lucas. I didn't expect this. I know it hasn't been easy," he said, cutting her off. "But you've proven yourself, and that's what matters." Lyra sat back in her chair, feeling like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had made it. She had fought through the doubt, the fear, and the uncertainty. She had proved to herself and to everyone else that she belonged. After a few moments, Lucas stood up, his expression turning serious once more. "Lyra, I want to make sure you're comfortable here. I know you've faced a lot of challenges, but I also want to make sure you're getting the support you need. If there's anything you need, anything at all, just let me know." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you. I appreciate that more than you know." Lucas smiled warmly. You've earned it. Now let's get back to work. As they walked back to the main office floor, Lyra felt like a new person. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. She had proven that she could overcome the challenges and make a place for herself in this world. She had a job, a purpose, and most importantly, a future. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks and meetings. Lyra was no longer just an outsider, but a valuable member of the team. As the clock struck 5, she gathered her things and headed home, eager to share the news with Nara. When she walked through the door of their small apartment, Nara looked up from her homework, her eyes wide with excitement. How was your day, Mama? Nara asked. Lyra smiled, bending down to give her daughter a big hug. It was the best day, she said. I'm staying here, Nara. I've made it. Nara's face lit up, and she hugged her mother tightly. I knew you could do it, Mama. I'm so proud of you. Lyra held her daughter close, feeling a rush of love and pride. This was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, but she knew now that she was strong enough to face them. With Nara by her side, there was nothing she couldn't overcome. As they sat together, Lyra looked out the window watching the sunset. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had a place in the world. She had fought for it, and now she was living it. The future was bright, and she was ready to face whatever came next.